What we're going to tie is a Mohair Leech, or a variation of a Mohair Leech actually. I'm going to tie this on a size 6 hook. 2 or 3x long works fine. I'm going to put a bead on this to weight it. Alright, start your thread. Just make a few turns toward the eye or toward the bead. Then bring your thread back over what you just wrapped, and that'll lock it in place. Then just wind your thread back to the back of the shank. And we'll be ready to add the tail, which we're going to use marabou. And just find a nice fluffy piece. Pull it off there. We're going to get rid of this short stuff at the bottom of the feather. Just go up about 1/4 of an inch or so and cut 2 pieces right at the stem. I'm going to lay those stems together. That'll form our tail. You can trim the stems out of there. And I like to pull a little bit of this fluff out of the ends or the tips of these marabou fibers. It'll cut down on bulk when you tie it in. Get up to your hook shank, hold it close to the shank, wrap your thread around it to secure it. 8 or 9 times, that'll make our tail. We're going to take some leech yarn. About a 6-inch piece or so is plenty. And extend a little bit of that out between your thumb and index finger. Tie that in right where you tied the tail in. If you've got a lot of material sticking out the front of your thread wraps, you can trim it off. If it's just a little bit, you can just wrap over it with the next material or your thread. This is a pretty buggy fly, so you don't have to be real neat with it. This is called polar chenille. We're going to take about the same length of it. Tie it in the same spot we tied in the leech yarn and the tail. Once you get that in there securely, wind your thread forward up behind the bead. Just leave your thread hanging there. We're going to wind these both at the same time. And we do want to keep them from twisting. So just make sure as you're bringing that around you're not twisting them up. And you also want to wind this so that after each turn or so you're pulling the material to the back of the fly. That'll keep you from wrapping down the material. If it twists, just wind it the other way or untwist it. After each turn or two, just stroke that back. If it really wants to wrap one in front of the other, say the polar chenille wants to get in front of the other, just wind it that way. Don't fight it too much. Just wind it just every turn or so. Remember to pull the fibers to the back. You can, every 3 or 4 turns, just kind of run your finger against that leech yarn and it'll fuzz it up. that up against the bead. And it looks like you don't want to crowd the bead too much. Hold both of those materials, the leech yarn and the polar chenille, up in your right hand. Bring your thread right behind the bead. Tie it down. Once you get 3 or 4 turns on there, you can trim off the polar chenille and the leech yarn. Do a half dozen or so more turns just to make sure that that's in there nice and tight. And if this looks kind of, if the body looks kind of matted down, don't worry about it. We can get in there later and pick out some of that and make it a little fuzzier. Do our whip finish. Usually about 6 turns, 6 or 7 turns on that's good. I like to finish that with the whip finisher on top, so I can just bend that in, pull back with my thread. There you have your knot tied. And apply a little bit of head cement right there to the thread wraps if you like. That'll help it hold together. Now to get this to kind of fluff out, you can just take a needle, a bodkin of some sort, and just kind of run it through there, top and bottom. You don't want to pull too hard, but just enough to kind of fluff it out. And I usually take it out of the vise to do that. For me it's a little bit easier, but you can leave it in if you want. And if you have any out of kind of proportion fibers that look really long, you can go ahead and trim those out. But this fly really does work good, buggy and kind of messy looking. And you can fish it as a streamer, cast it out and strip it back. You can drift it underneath an indicator if you like. But it's a very effective pattern, works well in the Ozarks for trout, smallmouth, but it's a good warm water fly also.